computer. Then I could type stuff rather than handwrite it. So that solved the poor, and when I say poor, I mean terrible handwriting. So I could write words. The other good thing about it is, surprise, surprise, a spell checker, which was my lifesaver, because I could type things and they'd say, no, that's not right, and they'd even suggest solutions. Even now, on my computer, when I type emails, I got a free program called Grammarly, Grammarly, I think. Yeah. And that will tell me, hey, look, it's not Word, Where, it is where, Were. And it will tell me that I've made a mistake, so I can correct it. So again, the use of a computer is very good. Now, throughout my industrial career, there are some things that, at least in my humble opinion, I think I've done very well. I have learned to listen to people and to try to understand the big picture, not to focus on some little item, but to try to understand the big picture. And in my first year in university, I had a lecturer in social sciences, and he was making a point one day: there is no such thing as truth. Now, this is clearly a ridiculous statement. He's absolutely wrong. And it was only during life that I suddenly started to realize, yes, there is no such thing as truth, because you are only seeing things or stating things according to your position. The person you don't agree with is actually standing on the other side. And Sekou, if you remember when I explained this to you about looking the front of your hand and the back of your hand. Right. And if somebody says, okay, explain what you've seen, and you've never seen a hand before, you've no idea what it is, I can tell you what the hand looks like, but if you don't trust me, you know I'm lying to you, because what I'm telling you is nothing like what you're looking at. And therefore, I've learned in life that what you have to do is, when you get into a disagreement or a situation where you're not sure what to do, try to look at a problem from the other person's perspective. Now, a lot of this came from the fact of my dyslexia, that I had to find ways of looking at things in different ways and from a different position. Right. Now, what you'll normally find is that dyslexics are usually, and I should add that dyslexia is not an uncommon thing. There's anywhere from 4 to 8% of the population, it is considered, that have some level of dyslexia. If you don't know what it is, it causes you problems. Very often, if you've got a kid that seems pretty bright, but is having a hard time being able to read, write, or spell at a grade level, maybe they're dyslexic. If they're labeled lazy, dumb, careless, immature, maybe they're dyslexic. If they're not behind enough to cause the school to do some testing, could be there's a problem. Very often, you'll find that a dyslexic has relatively a high IQ, but may not test well, either written or oral. See, orally. There's the dyslexia coming out. You can do it well orally, but not written. You get a very feeling of a low self-esteem when you're young, and that certainly was me. Therefore, what did I do? I became the class clown. And Seiko, you know me. I've got a good sense of humor, or I think I can find humor in anything. But it was a coping mechanism.
Coping mechanism.
Yeah. And what I can do, though, I mean, I am relatively good at with my iPhone and my computer. I've never taken a lesson in my life, but I've always been able to fiddle around and figure it out. Not by reading if I read the instructions, it's, and I hate to say it, it's Chinese to me. But
okay. Now,
I can figure it out. Sorry?
Yeah. Let me ask you a few questions before we end. We should into the end. You, at the time you're talking about World War II, I don't think at that time the schools were equipped to diagnose dyslexia, no?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That was not. I'm sure that if you go back on the literature, you'll find there are people that was looking at it in those days. But certainly, the average school would have no idea what dyslexia was. Not at all.
So none of the dyslexia cannot be hereditary. You cannot get it from your parents, right? It's just something.
Yeah, and again, it's not a disease. You know, you don't catch dyslexia. And there's a huge amount of research on this subject, and it is some small defects in a certain part of the brain, particularly that dealing with homonyms, the sounds of letters and words, and they're not quite working right. So it is a very specialized thing that's very often very hard to diagnose and understand. It also is something that means that a second language is extremely difficult for people with dyslexia to learn. I think I told you once. Yeah. Okay. Now let me. That's a good example. When I was at school, I studied French for 5 years. I took the final examination. I sat down. I wrote my name on the top of the paper, sat there for an hour, handed it in. Didn't write one word on it because I had absolutely no idea. But later in life, I was working in Quebec province. And at that time when I was single, what did I do in the evening? I did what any good British guy would do. I would go to the bar and drink beer. Now, the barmaids, very attractive young ladies, would start talking to me. And I learned French like a baby learns. Few words, bit here, bit there, and in the end, I could speak passable French. Now, maybe my grammar is not perfect, but I do relatively well. I can survive in French. Whereas when I learned it with the written word and at school, not a clue. I had no idea.
Okay. So, Alan, I've been warned that we have 2 minutes left. So What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you two questions at the same time. You mentioned that you were living in a town near where they used to make tanks, and it was bombed by the Germans. And also, you have lived in several countries in the world. If you have to pick one country to live, I'm assuming it's the U.S. Between England, Belgium, Canada, USA, and China, which one you prefer?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Funnily enough, I enjoyed living in China very much. I found it challenging, exciting, and basically because of the massive changes, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I feel I lived through history.
Right. And then the second question would be, you were sleeping on the ground. How was that experience? Because today kids will not know anything about that.
Well, at that time, I was between 0 and 2 years of age. I didn't get a vote in it, and I didn't know much about it. The only thing is, I survived the Second World War, so to me, it was wonderful.
Okay. All right. So, Sekou Radio listeners, thank you for listening. Alan Ridley spoke us today about dyslexia. I think I have learned a lot about dyslexia today, and I hope the millions of people who are listening to us have learned about dyslexia. If you have questions, or you can reach Sekou Radio through Radio Byte regarding dyslexia, and then we can put you through in contact with Alan Ridley. Alan, thank you, and then we are going to move into our part 2, Alan Ridley doing business in China. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you, Sekou.